Big Cat Weekend was hyped up, and Auburn acted like an elite program this weekend.
You are Locked On Auburn, your daily podcast on the Auburn Tigers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Yes, welcome on into Locked On Auburn, your daily Auburn Tigers podcast. I'm your host, Zac Blackerby, and thank you so much for making Locked On Auburn your first listen every single day. Of course, Locked On Auburn is brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. Lindsay Crosby of AuburnDaily.com and other places joins us to recap this historic recruiting weekend for the Auburn Tigers. Talk about the best moments. We're going to talk about how special this 2026 class is going to be. But Lindsay, the big picture takeaway is, okay, something was hyped up at Auburn, and then they actually delivered. This coaching staff actually delivered by propelling this 2026 class to be the number one class in the entire country. And then obviously adding a very talented corner in Blake Woodby to the 2025 class and flipping Antonio Coleman back from Alabama.
Yeah, this is what we were thinking that Auburn was capable of doing. And I mean, for the last decade, right? You've looked at what Auburn's been able to do on the field during the end of Chiswick, the prime of the Gus Malzahn era. Sure. You were hanging with some of the big boys on the field, but recruiting, you never really felt like you were where you should be. This is where Auburn is capable of being as a program. And obviously, the Jims and Joes lead to the wins, right? You got to be in the blue chip ratio. You got to bring in the classes. Auburn is bringing in championship caliber classes. And I think we see this being number one in the country as of right now definitely tells you that Auburn is capable of hanging with the most elite of elite programs in the entire country. The question is going to be now, can you back that up on the field in the fall?
Yeah, I mean, you got to win this year, at least do enough to make sure everybody believes in what you're building to be true. And I think Auburn will be good enough to hold on to everybody in the 2025 class. But it's just so many times things are hyped up at Auburn, and then we have to excuse our way out of it. And we didn't have to do that this weekend. I mean, leading into Friday night and then early Saturday morning, you had the national folks of John Garcia with Rivals. You had Wilt Fong writing about it on 3. You had Hayes Fawcett say, hey, watch out for Auburn this weekend. And not only for the 2025 class, but also the 2026 class. I mean, guys who are about to be juniors at national media in the recruiting space are saying, this guy going to Auburn this weekend is a big deal. And a lot of those guys obviously ended up committing. It's just so refreshing. It's like, okay, hey, national media, everyone, I'm telling you, look at Auburn. And then Auburn delivered. And that's been the biggest thing. Like, the energy around Auburn has always been there. It's been the execution. And now it seems like everything is aligned with Hugh Freeze, with the NIL and on the victory, and a lot of these key players. It's just everything is coming together for Auburn. And I think what happened this weekend is a sign of things to come, of what to expect during the Hugh Freeze era, Lindsay.
Yeah, the initial proof of concept was all of the flips you got last year, right? So many guys that were committed to elite programs that turned those programs down to come to Auburn. That was proof of concept number 1. Proof of concept number 2 is being able to go out to a lot of these uncommitted kids for the future. Yeah. And arguably guys that you were probably a little bit behind on when it came to recruiting from when your staff was hired versus Georgia's staff and the continuity they've had and things like that.
Sure.
But being able to get them to commit to your school as well. And so every single time that it matters in talent acquisition, whether it's been like flipping players from other schools, getting that initial commitment, getting transfer portal guys, Auburn and Hugh Freeze have shown that they are capable of hanging with anybody in the country when it comes to acquiring talent. And I've already said it once in this pod, but you gotta have the dudes. You have to have the talent if you want to be an elite program. And Auburn's doing everything right to bring in these players and to get elite talent into the building.
Yeah. Yeah, and it doesn't seem like they're done. I mean, obviously the commits and flips that they got this weekend were very exciting, but Fagans is expected to announce later today, and Auburn is projected to land him. I know he went to Alabama yesterday, so we'll see how that recruitment kind of finalizes itself, but he's expected to pick Auburn. And then, Derek Smith is a guy that a lot of people are talking about as well. Can he be that guy that flips from Alabama to Auburn? A lot of people expect it to happen this weekend, but does that happen at some point this week? Jared Smith, the very talented edge rusher, he's announcing on August 3rd. And to me, like, if Auburn can pull off all of these, there's no way you don't respect them for what they're doing in the 2025 class. And look, I know there's so many folks out there, Auburn fans included, or at least some Auburn fans are saying, yeah, but you don't have a quarterback. Well, give it time. I mean, it seems like all the momentum is certainly there. I can't imagine that the staff is just ignoring the fact that they don't have a quarterback in this class, or maybe they're kind of figuring out, okay, how do we pivot if we don't have a quarterback in this class? It's just, there's still things that you can point at to focus on negatives if you want to. And I saw a lot of people do that. They just weren't impressed because more of the folks that committed this weekend were 2026 guys instead of 2025 guys. And it's like, get over yourself. I mean, what this staff is doing is very, very impressive. And it's just, you're really, at this point, you're a hater. If you don't think what happened this past weekend was historic, you're just being a hater, and you're trying to find something wrong with what Hugh Freeze and the staff are doing. Because you can make the case that this past weekend will go down as one of the bigger recruiting weekends in Auburn history.
Yeah, I mean, I can't tell you the last time Auburn was number one in on the class. Granted, you have plenty of time for these guys signed, but still, when's the last time Auburn can say, yeah, we have the number one class in the country? Not Ohio State, not Georgia, not Texas,
Yeah,
Auburn.
Sure.
And it's hard to objectively find fault outside of maybe that quarterback question. And even then, in the world of the transfer portal, it is not as critical to get one of the best quarterbacks every single season. I still believe Auburn's going to get one of the best quarterbacks. I just mentioned a minute ago, Auburn's been very, very good at flipping guys from other schools, and there are quarterbacks out there that can be flipped or that have not committed yet. Yeah. But even if you don't bring in a quarterback, you still have a lot of talent in the room. You still have the ability to go out and get a guy out of the portal. So
yeah, we both still think that they will have a quarterback in the 2025 class. We'll see who that could possibly be down the road. We'll see. All right. Maybe the biggest surprise from this weekend, but I'm not holding my breath quite yet. We'll discuss in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at Ibotta. Ibotta is a free app that lets you earn cash back every time you shop, and you can earn on hundreds of items from groceries to beauty supplies, even toys. So you can make sure you're beating inflation no matter what you're purchasing. Lindsay, can you imagine not beating inflation with Ibotta? Can you imagine it?
I cannot imagine just leaving money aside by not using Ibotta.
Yeah, the average Ibotta user earns $256 a year. So that could cover the cost of an entire shopping trip, or maybe cover a flight or a fancy dinner with the significant other that you've been craving. Right now, Ibotta is offering our listeners $5 just for trying Ibotta by using the code LOCKEDONCollege when you register. So go to the App Store or the Google Play Store to download the free Ibotta app to start earning cash back, and use code LOCKEDONCollege. That's Ibotta, IBOTTA, in the Google Play Store or the App Store. Just use code LOCKEDONCollege. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends at Factor. Warmer, sunnier days are calling, and you can fuel up with Factor's no prep, no mess meals. Lindsay, can you imagine cooking your own meals right now? Just heat them up with Factor.
It's too hot to cook your own meals right now. Just
that's what I'm saying.
Take a Factor meal, pop it in, follow the directions to get it ready, eat some fantastic food.
Yeah, and they've got different options: Calorie Smart, Protein Plus, Keto. Factor's fresh, never frozen meals are dietitian approved and are ready to eat in just 2 minutes. Imagine waiting longer than 2 minutes to eat a meal.
Not going to.
So head to factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 and use code lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next month. That's code lockedoncollege50 at factormeals.com/lockedoncollege50 to get 50% off your first box plus 20% off your next box while subscriptions last. So a huge surprise to me this weekend, full disclosure, I'll get into that in a second, but Antonio Coleman flips back to Auburn from Alabama. So let's just kind of go through this. Was committed to Bama, flipped to Auburn, flipped to Bama, flipped back to Auburn, which on its surface, if Antonio Coleman becomes part of Auburn's class and in December he signs with the Tigers, great. That's awesome. He's a great player. I'm very, very excited about the idea of him wearing orange and blue one day. The issue is like at this point, what's to stop him from flipping again? You got to think Hugh Freeze and the staff are aware of what this looks like. And so to me, like you got to think Freeze said, are you done? Like, surely he didn't just let him commit just to commit. Surely there was some sort of deeper conversation, a come to Jesus meeting between the two. It's like, well, you got to pick at some point. So I'm hoping that's the case. But I mean, if he goes and just kind of continues visiting other places and goes back to Bama on a regular basis, it's like, what's the point? What's the point of this?
That's the point I was going to make is I think watching his visits will be telling, right? If he doesn't show up to Alabama when they're expecting to see him, if he skips visiting other schools, that would give you a little bit better idea of, okay, he realized maybe this is where he wants to be and is going to stay committed to the class.
Yeah.
But like, this is tough. It was September 2023. He committed to Alabama, flipped to Auburn in December, flipped to Alabama in March, and now in July, flipped back to Auburn. And it doesn't matter until signing day, right? That's when it actually matters. But at the same time, you want to keep him in the class. Obviously,
he's a good player. Totally.
He's a very good player. He has talked about doing a lot of the work. He wants to get a little bit stronger, getting a little better with his pad level. But he's talked about getting off the ball, how that's a strength of his. Likened himself to a similar game to Aaron Donald. Not calling him Aaron Donald, the next Aaron Donald, but you can see how that
he is. If he comes to Auburn, I hope he is, though.
You can see how that could, lend itself to a successful college career. You want the kid in the class. He's incredibly talented. Question's going to be, does he stick with Auburn? And honestly, I'm going to watch the visits. If he's not taking visits the rest of the summer and in the fall, then maybe you're going to have him.
Maybe it's legit.
We'll see what happens.
You got to think the kid and then, his family around him. It's like, it's not a good look, but hopefully it's done. Cause I want Antonio Coleman to play for Auburn. No question about it. It's just, we got to get closer to December for me. But obviously he's a huge addition to this class, both physically and then obviously the impact that he can have. My understanding is this wasn't a situation where Auburn upped the, any sort of packaging or offer. It sounds like this was just a situation where Auburn kind of said, hey, if you really want to be here, there's a place for you, but you got to make sure you're all in. So we'll see what happens with Antonio Coleman. The other member of the 2025 class at Auburn added over the weekend, Blake Woodby, a guy who I'm very, very excited about. It was probably the highlight of the additions for me, Lindsay, just because I love corners, and I think Blake Woodby is going to be very, very special at the next level. And I just kind of think he handled business the right way. He decommits from Ohio State when it didn't feel like it was the right fit. And he didn't rush anything because it kind of felt like he was going to quickly go to Auburn. I think the fact that it took a little bit longer than we expected before he officially committed makes me feel better about his commitment. So I'm very excited that the Blake Woodby recruitment is done and he's committed to Auburn.
The anti-Antonio Coleman? No, the fourth corner in the class. It's a position we've talked this fall about. You lost some guys to portal and injury. You've got some more guys who are going to go pro. You're going to need depth there. You like the fact that you can go up to Maryland to take one of the best players in the state, right? It's not just Hugh Freeze is not just recruiting in the Southeast or in Alabama and Georgia. He's able to go across the country to get guys that he wants to get. And you look at some of his laser times, you're right. I think it was 247 wrote a thing about him, talking about in the short shuttle, a 405, 40-yard dash, under a 4.4. He's an incredibly fast player. Yeah. And like this coaching staff has shown they can develop players, they can scheme them well. At a certain point, like you can't teach speed. And so having those raw tools combined with Auburn's history of developing cornerbacks over multiple different coaching staffs tells you that this dude has what it takes to potentially be a draft pick in the future. And you love adding him to a class that bolsters an area of weakness. And you look at like, you could have multiple guys go pro out of that class at that position. You love it. You love it.
Yeah. Yeah. Auburn's still sitting at 12th when looking at the 2025 class, but we already mentioned a few guys to keep an eye on over the next few days. We'll see if they all pick Auburn, how far Auburn jumps up, but you got to think they'd be a top 10 class again if everything happened that way. The 2026 class, though, is what was the most exciting over the course of the weekend, just because Auburn is now atop the country when you look at the 2026 class. Let's break more of that down in just a moment, right here on Locked On Auburn. Today's show is brought to you by our friends at FanDuel. Lindsay, can you imagine wagering on sports anywhere other than our friends at FanDuel?
I would never do it.
Yep. Nope. We definitely would not do that. I love sports, love them so much that I never want them to stop. And right now it's a little slower. Other than Major League Baseball, there's not a whole lot going on. And so all I have to do is open up the app, though, with FanDuel, because they understand that it's kind of the slow time of the year. So right now, FanDuel's hooking up all customers with a boost or a bonus daily. Every single day, there's something for everyone, every day, all summer long. So head over to FanDuel.com and start making the most out of your summer. FanDuel is the official sports betting partner of Major League Baseball. You can visit FanDuel.com, of course, for more information. And thank you so much to FanDuel for being the official partner of the Locked On Podcast Network. When looking at the 2026 class, Lindsay, there's so much to like, especially on the defensive side of the football. And they've got some offensive guys too, Denarius Gray and Kale Ellis. But the three guys that they added this weekend to give them that number one spot in 2026, Hezekiah Harris, Shadarius Tootle, the linebacker, and Jamichael Garrett, the linebacker. Auburn adding two top 10 linebackers in the span of just a few hours of each other is very, very exciting. The upside with this class is where they currently sit. The realistic upside is they stay in the conversation for the top class in the entire country for 2026. And like that was kind of been a hypothetical that we talked about. Now that they're there, there's no reason why they can't keep it by the time it's all said and done next December.
Yeah. And like looking at these guys, I'm really excited about Hezekiah Harris, right? As much as I want to say Tootle is my favorite because of the name, just a fun name to say. Sure. But like you look at Hezekiah Harris and the thing here, 6'5", 235, looks really just kind of natural as an edge rusher. You see some guys who are freakish athletes and they get pushed down to edge and told to go after the quarterback, and you can tell they're trying to figure it out. He just looks really natural. The change of direction is really good. And thinking back about some of the classic dominating Auburn defenses in recent history, you think about there was that one dominant guy who was the corner of the entire pass rush. And it feels like he could be that guy. But then also you kind of look at the timing of everything and some of the non-on the field stuff about the commitment. He was the first guy to pop over the weekend. You have to feel like that kind of started the momentum. And from what some of the reports we've seen, some of what we've heard about, he's one of those natural recruiters. Every class, you got a couple guys who are actively recruiting the rest of the class. Walker White did that last year. You know, that always ends up being impactful. And to have a 5-star who's out there from in-state, from Huntsville, who everybody wanted, had an offer from Georgia, A&M, Alabama, LSU, out of the state, USC wanted them, Notre Dame wanted them, to come to Auburn and be actively recruiting for you makes you feel good about, one, you're not going to have him flip like Antonio Coleman did. And then two, makes you feel good about like, he's going to make folks want to come play with him. He's selling, come play with me. We can be a special class. We can be the best recruiting class in Auburn history. We can be one of the most successful classes in Auburn history and on the field results if you come play with me. That's a big thing to me and should alleviate some of the concerns about a flip because it's a dude who's actively recruiting for you.
Yeah, it seems like he's all in, and it seems like he's been pro Auburn for a long time. I think he's a real possibility to get that 5th star before the next cycle officially gets going. I mean, he's the number 3 edge across the board. I'd have a hard time seeing him not get a 5th star if that ranking stays the same. But 6'5", 230 with 2 years left of high school football. I can't wait to see how his body develops. I mean, because he's listed at 230, but he looks pretty lean. And so I think he's got a frame to pack on more weight. And I'm kind of curious to see if it could be enough where he could be an edge or, a defensive end, a strong side defensive end in passing situations. There's just a whole lot to be excited about when you look at Hezekiah Harris. Yeah, go ahead.
It reminds me of Keldrick Falk, how he was a physical freak early in high school. And then when he got to Auburn, he was able to put on some good weight. And now he's able to take on multiple roles of he can play that defensive end role if you need him to. He can do a lot of different things because of the frame and because he's already physically gifted and he's got more development time in high school. So kind of similar situation there where you can see a lot of different development paths physically for him between now and when he actually enrolls.
Yeah. Shadarius Tootle, I think, is probably the one that's the most underrated addition. I think Jermichael Garrett got a lot of attention and rightfully so. But Shadarius Tootle, to me, when I watch Tootle's tape, it seems like he's got that extra little edge to him that you want in a guy who's going to be in the middle of your defense. And that's nothing against Jermichael Garrett because I think he has it too. But I think he's kind of getting credited for it. I don't know if Tootle's necessarily getting credited for like how good of a player he actually is. And to me, his ability to track down the football and to find the ball carrier and to navigate through blockers, I'm just excited to see what Deshaun Davis type levels of energy and just kind of magnet to the football is what I see in Shadarius Tootle's future. And that's pretty high praise.
Yeah. The thing here with him, like super long legs, but can still change direction really well, can accelerate really well. And it feels like those guys have the ability to he might have one little growth spurt left and end up 6'5" or something, right?
That'd be wild.
Yeah. I do like it's natural physicality and natural athleticism. It's not something where he's having to hustle to outwork his physical limitations, right? He is naturally gifted and has the instincts with it. He feels like a guy that 1 or 2 more years of dominant high school football, especially coming out of Mobile, where those dudes always have that sort of attitude and that edge, feels like he could be a guy who could eventually get up into a 5th star. But either way, you just love the versatility, right? You feel like he could maybe end up being an edge or be a guy who could play multiple different roles for you. I do feel like the next kind of dimension of football, kind of like in baseball, because I got to bring it back to baseball, are those guys who can do multiple different things and you don't have to do wholesale personnel changes and guys can take on different roles. He feels like a dude that, depending on who you play on a Saturday, he could be at edge, he could be at linebacker, he can do a lot of different things. And so you got to be excited about it. And then just love bringing in those Mobile guys. I feel like we have a good track record with guys from Mobile.
Sure, no question. You got a favorite moment from this past weekend? I know there's several to pick from.
I think for me, it's just seeing the steady drip of commitments, right? It's not one specific moment, but it felt like every 2 hours or so, another dude was deciding, yes, this is the school for me. And you just started racking up commitments one after the other. And every time you have great big commitment, the internet would go nuts, Twitter would go nuts, and everybody like, man, Auburn's having a great weekend. And then 2 hours later, they're retweeting their same tweets and like, I can't believe how good this is. And to just dominate a big recruiting day across the country the way Auburn did. To me, that was kind of the moment, not one moment, but that was kind of the big takeaway, was how prevalent Auburn was in the national conversation all day. It wasn't just like, hey, Auburn got 1 or 2 great commitments. No, you owned Saturday. And that's not something we can say a lot in a good way.
Yeah. I'm going to say that my favorite moment was actually Antonio Coleman flipping, just because I didn't see that one coming. Everything else is like, okay, yeah. Like, we recorded 6 shows on Friday. We pre-recorded 6. We were able to drop 4 of them. Like, Antonio Coleman was not one of the ones that we pre-recorded. And so to me, that was just a big surprise. I just didn't realize that was really on the radar or close to happening. And maybe it wasn't, and maybe it was an emotional thing. I don't know. I have no clue. But like I said, he's a great player, and I really hope he suits up for Auburn. And so just kind of taking an elite defensive lineman back from your rival, that was an exciting surprise for me. So I'll go with Antonio Coleman flipping back is my favorite moment from the weekend.
Yeah, I mean, that's the thing. There's so many great moments to choose from.
Yeah,
feels like not a recruiting conversation we've had in a couple years. So you'll love it.
Yeah. What a cool weekend. What a cool weekend. It's like, there was that stretch there where I had to go pick up my kid. My mom was watching her, and I had to go pick her up. And I'm like, I don't know if we're going to get another commit in the 10-minute drive over to her house. So that was just cool. We never really felt anything like that before. So that was a lot of fun. So hats off to Hugh Freeze and the staff for making the weekend exactly what it was. So, Lindsay, how can people check out everything that you've got going on?
A lot of my content's available on Athlon Sports, whether it's Auburn, auburndaily.com, the Atlanta Braves, bravestoday.com, and all over the Athlon Sports Network. I'm on Twitter at Crosby Baseball, mostly baseball, but there'll be some Auburn stuff in there as well.
Yeah, sure. And be sure to check it out. auburndaily.com is where you can find my written stuff as well. Please like the video. Please subscribe. We'll see you next time. This has been Locked On Auburn.